Hey, welcome back to the Zilosophy podcast. As you'll see and notice, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm blindfolded. For those listening, I'm blindfolded. Why is that? Because today's show is about this book, which maybe you can see if I'm putting it in front of the camera. I can't tell. I'll put it right here. You can probably see it. Blind Vision by Howard Myers and Chad Myers. We have them on the podcast today. Howard Myers was a Vietnam veteran who lost his eyesight in Vietnam from a landmine, earned a Purple Heart, but instead of being depressed and handicapped for the rest of his life, he decided to live an extraordinary life. So he became one of the top salesmen for Mass Mutual Insurance. He golfed, he water skied, he snow skied, he runs still every day. He's run 10-mile races as a blind person. He's been to Vegas to party. He's driven cars, just never made an excuse, never wanted to be a victim. It's a great story about acceptance and perseverance and visualizing the things that you want in your life. For him, he's got no option other than to visualize the things in his life because literally his vision has been taken away. His son Chad is the co-author of the book. He's become a very good friend of mine. He's an English teacher and a life coach and a very inspirational dude himself, as you would imagine, growing up in a household watching a blind man, his father, do all these things. He didn't really get to have a whole lot of excuses as a kid or as an adult about the things he wanted in his life. So there's a great conversation with those two. And coming along for the ride, and I'm glad he did, is Chris Viel, who's part of the Blind Vision group and the MPG group. They do speaking engagements together and workshops. And he's also a licensed therapist and a clinical director for a home for abused kids, where they take severely abused kids and rehabilitate them. So a lot of the discussion today is about veterans and kids, but really about all of us, because life is traumatic. As we just saw, we've all just been through and are still going through a traumatic experience together with COVID. And then the peaceful protests are great, but then the riots and the looting and all that stuff is not so great. And it's just a crazy time right now. So how do we rise above that trauma and that craziness to stay calm and stay present and work on what we can work on, which is each of us, like Howard. Every day he has to wake up and accept again that he's blind today, and then design his day from there the best he can and do the best he can with what he has that day. That is the same for all of us, except we get to see, so we don't have any excuses. So he never made any excuses. We shouldn't make excuses. And if we all worked on ourselves instead of pointing at those other people, whether we think they're dumb liberals or insensitive conservatives or anything in between, those people, whoever those people are for you, are not the problem. The problem is you're not working on yourself enough to be the best person you're capable of being. And the best person you're capable of being is not the person that points fingers and makes fun of the other people for their hypocrisy. Any of us can do that because we're all hypocrites, right? Some more than others, but really we all have things to work on for ourselves. And if we all worked on ourselves and didn't worry about anybody else, the world would be a lot better in a very short amount of time. So that's the story today. It's a great long episode, so I won't babble on too long. You know about Zilosophy on golf. There's an inclusivity chapter where I have some big meetings with some big golf organizations that I can't mention yet, but working on developing some huge programs to help the social justice and social advancement movement through some of the concepts that I've developed already through podcasts and videos and books and all kinds of stuff. So stay tuned for that. If you want to support me, you can go to PayPal, which is z@zilosophy.org. That's PayPal, z@zilosophy.org. Or you can go to my Venmo, which is at Michael-Zildjian. Thank you for listening. I can't wait for you guys to hear this episode. I can't wait to take this off. I've spent over a half hour in the episode just being blind with Howard to see what it was like. And I share a lot of my experiences and what it felt like and what it meant to me. So I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. We'll see you on the other side of the podcast.
Maybe it's not too late.
And we're recording. Welcome, guys. We've got Chad Myers, Howard Myers, and Chris Viel here on the Zilosophy podcast. Welcome, boys. Now,
thanks for having us, Michael.
Yeah,
Chad,
it's going to be fun.
Chad and Howard are the authors of this book, Blind Vision, which is about Howard's story, which we'll dive into deeply here. And then Chris Viel is a friend and a member of the Blind Vision team, who's also a family therapist and a clinical director. So that sets the tone. To get started, I thought I'd read a little bit from the chapter 14, the end of the book, just to set the tone for the podcast. And then that'll be the jumping off point for the conversation wherever it goes. So this is by, this chapter is by Dr. John Arden, who's a neuropsychologist. Everyone loves an archetypal hero, a person who against all odds saves a village or rescues a family from peril at risk of losing his life. People who have accomplished such heroic feats are rare indeed, but they are not the only people who have heroic acts. A person who transforms personal tragedy into triumph and then inspires others who have suffered great loss, that person too is heroic. I have just described Howard Myers. Howard and his son Chad share how he transformed personal catastrophe into triumph in his inspiring book. I just want to read one little more part here. What is resiliency? What is bouncing back after trauma? When you are dealt a catastrophe, how would you not only survive but thrive? Unfortunately, far too many people who encounter tragedy give up. They don't fight back and rise to the challenge like Howard. He did not let blindness defeat his vision of transcendence over catastrophe. He had, quote, sight. He had in sight the person he wanted to be and perhaps saw beyond his own expectations. Well, that's a nice tribute.
Yeah, got that going for you.
And it describes you well, Howard. As I told you on a private call last week, I'll say it again publicly. Thank you for your service. You are an American hero and an American treasure. And I don't just mean your service in Vietnam that earned you a Purple Heart and left you blind. What I mean is what you did after that for your country to set an example of being the best person you can be without making excuses. And this is no small feat. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that with the audience.
You're welcome. So for those who don't know, this story, Blind Vision, is about when you lost your sight on a landmine in Vietnam. And then, you know, you share very open and honestly about what it was really like to go through the dark times that quickly ensued beyond that. And then you shared with me last week when we were talking with Chad, that story, which I think you guys should tell again because it's a pretty extraordinary one, where you just decided, okay, it's time to get on with it and do the best I can with what I have. And I think that everybody has something like that in their life. It may be a very serious injury or trauma like you had, or it may be something less on the traumatic scale, a divorce or a loss of a job or a career. But we can all be sort of, pardon the pun, blindsided by something and then struggle to find our way to move forward. So how did you do it, dude?
Yeah.
Well, you know, while you were speaking, I was thinking about some of the experiences that I went through. And I think ownership of what was mine, whether it was fair or not, is when I started to live. And I remember the day and the moment I was walking down the sidewalk with my cane, dressed in my duds, and a lady came out and smiled, came out of this building and smiled at me, and I could tell that she was friendly and spoke to me very friendly. And I thought to myself, this is gonna be okay from now on. And that's when I think I started to live and accept the fact that my world was going to be different now. I'm going to have to learn how to live in the light, not the darkness.
Yeah.
Right. And that's something you talk about a lot in the book and in the talks that you've given, the choice between darkness and light. And you have that in a real way. You actually live in darkness because you can't see, but you choose to live in the light of all that is good in the world, despite, like you said, it's not fair. And you told me last week, you don't like being blind. Of course, I mean, who would, right? But you can't change it.
When when you realize and know what you're missing, that makes it a lot more difficult. It's kind of a double-edged sword. And it's when Chris shares with me how blue the sky is, I can identify from my memory what blue is and what the sky looks like.
Right.
And that's a privilege and a freedom that I think we all take for granted when we have eyesight.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah,
I do. I just want to go back before we go forward, because that story you told is great. And you mentioned you were wearing duds. Would you like to explain exactly what you were wearing to the audience out there? Because I think it's pretty awesome.
Well, I was a young man at that time, obviously 24 years old. Had on a pair of white dress pants. I had on a polka dot blue shirt, a colorful tie, and white bucks. And I was smiling, walking down the sidewalk, tapping with my cane.
God, what a visual. What?
Oh man,
And that was in you were walking downtown Flint, Michigan. Yeah,
Downtown Flint, Michigan, going to the Torch Lounge to have lunch.
You were working for the Mass Mutual, I believe, at that time,
Correct.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
Chad, let's bring you.
It just happened to be.
Sorry, go ahead, Howard.
I was just going to say, I was told by my mentor, Denny Floden, that I was the first blind life insurance agent in the United States with Mass Mutual that went to work for them.
Right, and that's a great story in and of itself. It's in the book. You had to learn the rate book as a blind man and memorize it, and then go take the tests, and then they let you in. And not only did you continue to exceed their expectations, you were part of a thing called the Freshman Five, which is the top 5 rookie sales agents in the country. And that was quite an accomplishment, huh?
You know, I walked into Denny's office one day after I'd been there about 6 months. And I said, "How do you think I'm doing, Denny?" And he says, "Well," he says, "I think you're on schedule for this Freshman 5 award." He says, I didn't make it, and there's never been one in the Flint agency that has been a Freshman 5, and you're right on schedule. And the nice thing about it, at the end of the year, I ended up number 2 in the United States based on commissions, volume, contribution to your community, and number of applications.
Amazing,
Hustling.
amazing part of the story, which is why part of our discussions outside of the podcast are, how can I help you guys make this into a movie? Because not only is it a great inspiring story, which it talks about in the book, and Chad has been inspired as your son, and I've been inspired only reading this a couple weeks ago, and thousands of people in between. But the visuals of this story are incredible, of the things that you did. You water skied, you snow skied, you drove cars, you went to Vegas. I mean, there's a lot of stuff people with eyesight don't do.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I never really thought about that too much. I just did it.
Yeah.
Why don't you share with them how you would, hey, Michael, I think it'd be cool if you would share with them how he would get to appointments when he would first start out.
Yeah.
To me, that was just fascinating. Tell them how you used to do that. How you used to set that up.
And then a follow-up to that, Howard, once you got there, tell a little bit how you sold these people and why you were such a good salesman. I know it has a lot to do.
Exactly.
You weren't trying to sell anything. You were trying to actually help them.
Well, one thing I had to learn right from the beginning is taking responsibility of what was mine. And I did that by, and this what I didn't think was very fair. It was very frustrating. We used to have to make 100 phone calls on a Monday to schedule our week. And I remember sitting down at my desk and having a little tape recorder, listening to the people's name and their phone number, calling them, then having to scratch out some scribbling that my only one that could read it would be my wife. And after I accomplished those things, I memorized the application and the rate book before I went out to the interview, and found out what page it was on. I referred that to the person sitting across from me, asked him to read me what it says as far as premiums, dividends. In other words, I was getting them involved in the process of help, thinking they're helping me, they were helping themselves.
Okay, quick timeout right there, please. What is the exact question you would ask them? Because the way you phrased it was pretty awesome. Do you remember? You know what I'm talking about?
I do, Michael.
Yeah, go ahead, Chad.
May I borrow your eyes for a moment?
Such a charming sly fox you are, Howard.
Exactly.
I remember getting involved with the clients, and I went to this one appointment, and when I got all done, I was trying to figure out how I could make this thing work with this person that I was talking to who was totally blind like I was, and his wife was as well.
Wow.
And pretty hard to turn the application around, ask them to fill it out, even guiding them. So I had to call my my trainer, Denny Floden, and tell him, Denny, I think I'm in a predicament here. I have a sale made, but I don't know how in the hell to make it work. The person that I'm talking to is totally blind. And
that's the blind leading the blind.
The blind leading
Exactly.
the blind, literally.
Yeah.
This is the story.
I remember Denny getting in his car after I told him that and driving to where I was at, picking me up, helping me fill out the application, and giving me a ride back to the office.
Did you seal the deal?
Yeah.
Sealed the deal.
We all know the answer to that. That's the easy question.
Exactly.
How did you get there?
Yeah, how'd you get to your appointments?
Well, the best way that I could, you know, I walked around the office there and seeing what people were doing. A lot of people are just talking to entertain themselves. And I would walk up to them and say, by the way, Jerry, I have an appointment, you know, at 2 o'clock. If you're not busy, could I get you to drop me off at this appointment? And most of the time, you don't begrudge people of feeling good about themselves, helping others. And that's one thing I learned early on about blindness. Don't be afraid to ask, because if you don't ask, you'll probably do without.
Yeah,
I love it.
Look, it's an amazing thing because it's not just for blind people, right? Most people
Absolutely
have that issue. I have that issue. I've really worked hard to overcome it. I'm getting better at it. But I still, at some points, have trouble asking for help when help would be super easy. Instead, I find myself trying to force it and do it myself. And one thing I've learned, especially recently in life, is that we are not made to be independent beings. We are dependent beings. We come into this world dependent on our parents. We leave dependent on our children, or nieces and nephews in my case, and other friends. Yeah. And in between, we forget that we're dependent on each other and we need each other, which is why this country and this world is so chaotic. We think we're individuals and we're separate, and we're not. And so that unnatural way of being makes us crazy. I mean, that's my novice opinion. Chris, do you have an opinion on that as a professional?
Well, I just going to add, I think you're spot on, Michael, but I was just going to add that even from a gender difference, you know, for especially as males, we're programmed at a pretty early age to figure things out. There's a whole socialization process as men, as being problem solvers, and those type of things. So like a lot of men, we look at it as a weakness, unfortunately, to ask for help.
Yeah.
And
like directions.
and it's just the opposite of that. It's an amazing sign of strength to say to somebody, listen, I could use some help. That's just it's a strength sign, not a weakness sign whatsoever.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
as a young kid, I felt abnormal because I'm not your typical macho dude kind of thing. But what I
Yeah.
learned later in life is that I'm much more balanced than most guys are. I actually have, some feminine principles that are well intertwined into my way of being. And it's really served me well on being more balanced and not being that archetypal, forget it, I'm
Sure.
going to refuse help. But that's a great point. I want to stay on that because Chad and I want to bring you in a little bit more, Chad. I've never heard you be this quiet for this long. Pretty impressive. You talk a lot. We talk a lot about helping veterans, and post-traumatic growth is a concept you guys have worked on. But we know that veterans, especially ex-military people, especially mostly men for most of this time, but it's getting more and more women, regardless of gender, they're very tough individuals and they have a very hard time asking for help. The government, we know, has done a very poor job of giving help, but also I think veterans over time have done a very poor job of asking for help because they think it makes them weak. And as Chris just said, it's actually the opposite. It makes you strong to let go of that and ask for help. So Chad, I've given you a bunch of stuff there to riff on. Why don't you take that from there and run?
Well, I think I learned this actually through the process of writing the book and asking all these questions and collaborating with Chris and my dad, and then calling people that were involved in my dad's story, like Denny. And what I'm finding is that, wow, there was like a connection of mentors. I think in the book, we even talk about Denny's mentor who took him up, basically out of the pool one day, said, hey, I think I can teach you how to swim. And he was a coach and became like a surrogate father. And Denny paid it forward by hiring my father and then training him. And then what we've been trying to do is pay it forward and share the story. So what we found is that those connections, those relationships are part of the healing process. And what we found is that Dad is a perfect example of post-traumatic growth. And it's been around for a while, but I think it's starting to get some more and more attention. But we've all heard of PTSD. We've all know what post-traumatic, trauma is. But we are trying to get the message out there that you can grow through tragedy. You can grow through trauma. You can grow through it. And there's certain principles and training that takes place that actually Howard got the training. And so then Chris and I broke it down. We would have like little brainstorming sessions of like, how did Howard do what he did? And how did Denny do this? How did the two knuckleheads figure this out? It's young men. And we are like, wow, it was all about these, so like a championship mindset type of a thing where, Denny was around winners, and then he brought my dad around the winners, and then they held each other accountable. And that's kind of like the model that I'm seeing with this post-traumatic growth is like, you need somebody to believe in you, to hold you accountable, to help you through the process, to grow through the process. And there's certain tools and life skills that really are easy to implement, but the key is applying them. To know and not to do is not to know. And so we really want to, and we talked about this, Michael, about how it's important for men, for all of us, but for men to hold each other accountable and to say, hey, I'm trying to be a better human being. And, you do that through reaching out and, you and I shoot each other text, or Chris and I shoot each other text, or hey, Dad, checking in. Hey, how's it going, during the pandemic? And I'll never forget the day I was feeling kind of down. And, I'm like, gosh, this is crazy. The world's gone crazy, the pandemic, and, people in lockdown. And I'm like, I wonder how my dad's doing. And so I picked up the phone and I called him and I said, hey, Dad, how you doing? How you handling this quarantine? He said, well, you can tell when he gets in from a run because his mood's elevated for sure. And he said, well, I just got in from an hour run. He said, I really had a hard time getting back in from the trail out back where his track is. He says, it was really tough. And I'm thinking, an hour run, like you're almost 74. And he says, I just keep my attitude of gratitude, and I'm just blessed that I get to run. And he says, and I'm just like, okay, so there's another reminder.
Yeah. There's always somebody that's got it tougher than you. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. I just wanted to just add a little bit on to what Chad was talking about. When we talk about post-traumatic growth, I think there's a significant linchpin, if you will, that allows people to move from the trauma, if you will, of the episode, whichever caused in their life, to a place of growth. And that's when they make a decision of creating what I call a success identity versus a failure identity. And I think to a large part, what's happened in the last maybe 5 years is with the explosion of information we've gotten regarding our brains. I know myself as a clinician, when I'm working with someone with post-traumatic stress disorder, whether it's a combat soldier or somebody like that, simply helping them understand that their brain isn't broken, that there's nothing broken with them, that their brain is actually doing everything it needs to do to help them continuously feel safe. So part of that is coming in line with that and owning that. And I think that's what goes back to Howard when he accepted that. This is my world now. I'm in darkness. Anything that I go on from here, I'm creating. And he chose to create a successful identity. Right. Whether it means, okay, I'm going to do 100 cold calls, I'm going to do 110.
Right.
I'm going to do what it takes to create that successful identity. And that's a significant decision, right? It really comes down to choices. It really does come down to that, big C word of a choice.
Well, that's it.
What do you want to choose?
We all have a choice to react or not to any situation, right? What we don't realize is that most of us are choosing unconsciously.
That's right.
And when you have a traumatic event, that shifts. It's really interesting. I'd like to get your feedback on this, Chris. I remember being a younger man in my 20s. My dad's best friend's son had a liver disease and needed a liver replacement, and was very touch and go whether he was going to make it. He eventually did. But I remember talking to this guy because he was like a second dad to me, and saying, when something like that happens, it forces you to wake up and take accountability and make choices. And I remember as a guy in my 20s thinking, am I going to need to have a traumatic event to have that wake up call so that I can excel in life and really live up to my potential? I hope it's not going to take that. And luckily for me, it didn't. I was lucky enough that my midlife crisis was the opposite of most men. I had the cars and the cute wife and girlfriends, not at the same time. And so for me, it was like, okay, my first half of my life was really fun and I learned a lot. What's the second half going to be about? And I wanted it to be about helping people and hosting conversations that we talk about stuff that's not normally talked about. So we can normalize the trauma, because as Chad was saying, we've all been through a very traumatic event recently. But even aside from the pandemic and riots and all that, life is traumatic. We've all experienced trauma of some level. It doesn't matter how big or small on the scale. When it's happening to you, it's very real, right?
Absolutely.
So what do you think? Yeah. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and the word trauma gets used a lot. And I think it's important to remember that a traumatic experience is an experience that leaves me in a fear base, in a terror base, if you will.
Right.
So we all have episodes that happen in our lives that could be catastrophic, if you will, that could be devastating. Whether it was a traumatic episode, that's a different kind of a question. That's the kind of an episode that leaves me in a situation where I'm constantly in a fear place. And that's a tough thing to move through.
Which is what
That
the
can be a
news,
tough thing to
which is what the news
what's that?
programs us, it's what the news programs us to do if we watch it, is to just be in fear all the time. And
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Because once I'm in fear, I'm easily controlled. I'm looking for anything to give me a sign of security and safety. And if I believe that it has to come from outside of me, though, then I'm ripe for the picking for anybody to present that next safety thing to me. So that to me is a significant situation about, and what I have found as a therapist and working with my clients is normalizing the experience is paramount.
yeah,
Because the key is to not become resigned to it, but to align with it, to actually invite it.
well,
There's that anxiety I was expecting as I'm preparing to go to the store. What took you so long? Right. So I like to teach a little formula of acknowledge, honor, release. And that's the same kind of formula I use with a lot of the people that I work with. I'm acknowledging my experience. I honor it for what it's trying to teach me. I release it if I don't need it right now. And it's a very simple formula. I think Howard has done that like nonstop.
right.
Nonstop. I mean, I believe, Howard, you do that when you wake up in the morning. You have to acknowledge the fact I'm in darkness again.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and honor what am I going to do with this? And I'm going to release this because I'm moving forward. You're not going to find the bathroom. I know, right? So,
I like what you said there. One of the things I talk about a lot in my talks and books and videos and whatever is that you can't get where you're going until you accept where you are, right? Like you can't go anywhere except from the place that you are. And so it starts with acceptance, which is what Howard had to do. And Howard, in a show of solidarity, I'm now going to blindfold myself for as long as I can take it, which might not be that long, and continue.
We did this growing up, Dad. You remember when you had everybody in the family wear a blindfold and walked around the house?
That.
We didn't last.
Yeah, so that was probably not very fun, Chad, but it gave you a real insight into what his world is like, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I was evolved enough yet to understand. I think I went into fear right away. I think I can rip it off. So I think I did in a short amount of time.
Right, but isn't that a great thing for you to understand about your dad, that even though he's done this forever, that like Chris was just saying, immediately when he wakes up in the morning, there's got to be a moment of fear that he quickly washes away now. But like, oh my God, I can't see anything. Howard,
we talk about that all the time. Yeah, he talks about that. He shares that with us all the time. Every day he does that. He goes through that.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that I think one of the things I'd like to talk about is one of the things that we've done in our talks when we try to invite our audience to join Howard, like you're doing right now, Michael.
Yeah.
We did this a couple of years ago when we stood up and we asked the audience to stand up, and there was probably 700 people there. We asked them to all stand up and just to close their eyes, and then just keep them closed until we told them to open them. And this day, in fact, I believe was the actual 53rd anniversary of the day having his eyes blown out. And actually it was maybe 50th.
50th, yeah.
But
we didn't tell them
it was the 50th. It was the 50th anniversary. Yep. And so we didn't tell them how long they were going to be closed. And we just kept a silent count. So 50. When you're sitting there with your eyes closed, 50 seconds can feel like 50 minutes.
Sure.
Everything gets real silent, and the silence becomes real thick as well. And so we kept them there for 50 seconds. And Howard asked them to open their eyes. And you basically said, thank you for joining me, because what you just experienced for 50 seconds is what I've been experiencing for 50 years. Now, we did that not in an effort for people to say, oh, poor Howard. Oh, we feel so bad for you. Of course, some are going to feel that, obviously, but we did that because we wanted to start the process of empathy, which can lead to compassion. And Chad and I have talked about this so often. That really lays the foundation for a true connection.
Yeah. And
then when that's in place, now you can heal. Now you're part of a healing process between two people. Right now in our world, there's a lot going on of what I consider to be forced tolerance. and some of it is necessary to move the meter, if you will.
Yeah.
But we're not going to really ever heal as a species or a being until that level of compassion and empathy is genuine.
Right. That's the
And
point, is that the inclusivity and unity that we're looking for in the country cannot be forced. It has to come from an empathetic
that's
shift.
right.
And so
Yep.
that's
That's
why
right.
I'm so passionate about being involved, is because I see that, and I don't want to see that movement hijacked by people who just want to be victims and don't want to do it for the right reasons and force people to be nice. You can't force people to be nice. It's their choice. And you have to encourage them that that's the right
Yeah.
choice for them, and show them the benefits for them in being nice to other people.
No, I couldn't agree
Yep.
more. I couldn't
I'm
agree more.
Absolutely.
going to share something, Howard. So I've been blindfolded now, I don't know, a minute or two. And I'm noticing
Right.
immediately, one of my first reactions, things I noticed was, it's so much easier to disengage from a conversation and living life when you can't see. You know, it's a lot easier for me to sit here and just listen to you guys than to actually participate when I can't see. And so that's obviously something you overcome, as we just talked about, every day. And so how do you do that? How do you motivate yourself to stay engaged?
Well, I think the key to start with is awareness. You know, simply making yourself the kind of person that you really want to be for that moment, that day. And that when I go to bed at night and my thoughts and prayers, I thank God for the goodness of the day, and I try to visualize what kind of day I want to have, because by doing that, I find myself disciplining myself in a way that it needs to be done in order to make your world okay that day. And that's what I experience on a daily basis, because it's all about choice, as we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And if you don't
Can you talk a
make
little
those
bit?
right choices,
Sorry, go ahead.
say again.
Go ahead.
No,
Well,
I think he was finished.
I think I was finished with that thought.
Okay.
But,
See, again, being blindfolded
I know that's
has me
a
at
great
a
phenomenon.
advantage of what I would normally be doing, and I would have a much better chance of keeping the conversation flowing. But I like the rawness of this because I'm actively in it with you. Just so you know, Howard, I'm wearing one of those blindfold things that's sort of like a pillow that you wear. I wear it because sometimes I have a tough time falling asleep, so I have to sleep in to 9:30 or something, and I need to keep the light out so that my body doesn't know it's time to get up yet. And so my only experience with blindness is really that if I wake up in the morning and I'm not ready to get up, but I need to drink water that's next to the bed, you know, I'll feel my way around instead of taking this off so the light doesn't hit my eyes and my body doesn't start to wake up. But that's really, you know, that's a few times here and there throughout the year, and then I can take it off whenever I want, which is very different. But I want to go back to something you just said about visualizing. And Chad, I'd like you to chime in on this too, but we'll start with Howard. I wrote in my book a whole chapter on visualization. My book's about the parallels between life and golf. And in golf, Jack Nicklaus has a great quote. I never hit a great shot that I didn't first see in my mind. And that's what you just said, basically, in different words. And so we can visualize the things that we want to create in life, and that helps call them into the universe. And I'm sure Chris and Chad can speak more to the scientific brain side of that. But can you just talk a little bit more about your experience with, say, you know, for instance, when you wanted to become a sales agent, or you wanted to go water skiing, and what you had to do to visualize in your head first before you could do it so that you could actually do it?
Well, first of all, I think I had the privilege of eyesight for many years until I was 20. And that helped a great deal as far as when I visualized me out on the lake water skiing. I did that with eyesight at one time. I simply visualized being out there doing that again, only in a different setting. It was pretty interesting because when I got up on skis, I went to drop a ski and went slalom. And when I did, there was a bunch of people on this raft, and I almost hit them, and they started screaming and yelling. So I just dropped the rope and went down. But I'm not sure what that visual looked like.
Visualize a dock to have to ski around, did you?
No,
right?
I didn't.
It's a shame.
That's why when I heard these stories growing up, I was like, man, this sounds like a book. Like, and I was a kid in the back of the boat, and I was just watching my blind father ski, and I thought, well, that's probably what all blind dads do. So they probably just ski. I had no idea.
Yeah.
I just like, oh, he'd just say, hit it, and I'm just sitting back of the boat. And so most of the stories, ironically, were around like the grill, Dad. You remember we were talking around the grill, and someday we're going to write a book, and we would talk about someday, and we'd visualize talking on stage together. Remember that? And then one day
Yes,
I said to my dad, when someday? Like when is that someday? When's that going to happen?
Yeah.
And that's when I made the decision. Like it's going to be today. That's it. We're going to stop talking about this. We're going to start taking little baby steps, whatever those steps might be. And we know, Michael, writing a book, it's not as easy as it seems. Putting everything together and then, you know, sharing, and it was very cathartic experience with my dad sharing all his stories with us. And I just want to say, first of all, how honored I am to be able to do this with my dad and with Chris and with some, you know, and just talking to a guy like you. I mean, it's just a privilege, and it's been a wild, fun ride. And I think when we did some things together up in Michigan, man, we had some phenomenal times up on stage. We've shared some lots of laughter, and of course, when we did speak, it really did move people and inspire them, and most of the time a very emotional experience for the audiences.
And also a very healing one for you guys, I would imagine. Actually, I know because I've talked to you, but also I know because I do the same type of work. And the more I help people and connect people and wake them up and inspire them and brighten their day, all of that, the more therapeutic and healing it is for me, for my life's traumas, which have been, you know, not that bad in the grand scheme of things. I've lived a pretty fortunate life, and still it's not easy, and still it's traumatic.
You know, Michael, if you don't mind, I'd like to just touch base a little bit more on the visualization process. I think it's so important in this conversation.
I love it.
And especially when you're moving into post-traumatic growth. You know, one of the things that I call it the neurobiology of thought, because one of the things we've learned throughout many years is that, you know, our brain does not know the difference between real and unreal. There is no real to brain. Our mind, through through the collective senses, is creating a reality all the time,
Right.
which then we project out. That's a whole other conversation for another day.
Sure.
That would be a fun one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's Bonfire Wisdom, episode 1. But so for Howard, you know, one of the things that we do when we go on the road and we're going to speak and we get a hotel room, Howard always like to have his own room. And so he'll go in there and he'll spend first couple hours just literally walking around the room, touching the walls, feeling everything. Where's the bathroom door? Where's this? Where's that? He's creating a neuronal map. So he's using the tactile feel as he's walking through, and then he'll sit and he'll map how many absolute paces is it from the front door to where the first table is, and he has to make a left turn to go into the bathroom. And so he's going over and doing it over and doing it over. So it's repetition. He's creating these neural pathways, which he's creating now new muscle memories, so that he now has a visual map of his new environment. And one of the things that we do know is that the day that he lost his eyes and they took his eyeballs out in the field, probably almost instantaneously, the neural pathways from the other sensories started going into his occipital lobe area. Translation, everything that he touched and felt and smelled was now creating a visual picture. So he still was having pictures, but they just no longer were projecting outward. So I've always given Howard a hard time, telling him, man, you've had a privilege over the rest of us.
Yeah.
You know, you've got this amazing once you lock in and focus, dude, you've got it focused. You know,
Right.
we're
there's no
dealing with all these
distraction.
other distractions all of the time that we have to filter out. His filters are internal, not external, like ours have to be.
It's
So it's
funny
an
you
amazing
mention-
process of focusing, creating that image and that reality. And I think back about the Stanford basketball team when they did that beautiful research project when they took half of the team
Yeah,
and took an extra 100 free throws every single practice.
yeah.
And they took the other half of the team and they went in and did a nice meditation. And then they visualized with their eyes closed, doing every single step of their free throw. Deep breath, see it, and then they saw it go in, felt it go in. And the team, and the half of the team that took less physical shots ended up increasing their free throw percentage, I think by 10 or 15%, which is a phenomenal increase.
Yeah. Well,
When
I
you're
love,
not doing the actual physical. It was already happening internally, and they just went out and just did it then.
I love
And that's
that.
kind of what Howard does every day.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love that example in specific because it's actually in my book in the visualization chapter. And what you
Yes.
didn't mention was that there was a control group that didn't do either of those things and didn't change at all. But both the group that shot free throws
Yes.
and the group that visualized shooting free throws both got better, proving that visualization works. And I talk about that.
Absolutely.
One thing
Nice.
another thing I'm noticing here, Howard, sitting here with still the blindfold on, is that I don't have the luxury of letting my mind wander like I normally would if I had my eyes open. I could look off into the distance, see a few things, and still be listening. But if I'm not paying attention with my eyes closed, it's much harder to stay engaged in the conversation. So I'm experiencing
Mhm.
something else. And that sort of dovetails into one of the questions I wrote down, which I've now had to memorize because I'm not looking at my notes, is I think a really important one. And Chris may have just answered it, but I'd like to ask you, being that you don't have sight, what do you consider your most important sense? Is it touch? Is it hearing? Is it intuition? What is the one thing that does the most for you?
You know, it's interesting that you should ask that question because I'm sitting here thinking about how I communicate with people,
Mm-hmm.
and tone of voice is not what people say, it's how they say it.
Right.
And that means a lot when you can't see. I'm not distracted. I'm paying attention to what's going on. And it's interesting that you pick up, they say your other senses are
Enhanced. You can
enhanced.
become more enhanced. Yeah.
That's the word.
That's the theory. All right. They become more enhanced. Right.
And it's there all the time. It's just a matter of whether or not we use it or not, you know?
That's perfect. That's perfect. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. I just came up with a great idea for another career for you, Howard. Would you come with me on my next first date and read the tone of her voice? Take me under the table and give me a warning if it's
Yes.
a good tone or a bad tone.
Howard's actually good at that. There's stories that he told me about things from the past about tones and listening to people's voices. So I'm not surprised by your answer, Dad, because obviously you're relying on your ears, but also intuition or that repetition piece or the feeling piece. Chris, you remember when we were driving back from a workshop with Dad and we're driving, he goes, "Did we just pass Lake Pleasant Road?" We're like, "What?"
No, it was Fish Lake Road. Yeah, it was Fish Lake. We were, and we never even told him where we were. We just got in the car and we started off coming back home. He had no idea what roads we were on. We literally passed Fish Lake Road on another road, and he said to me, "Hey, Chris, did we just pass Fish Lake Road?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, we did, Howard." "What?" I'm like, "How?" He's like, "I've been on that road thousands of times. I know exactly how this road feels."
Yeah, yeah.
So he's
and so
feeling
I think,
the up and the down and the whatever, and he's got such memory of that. It's it's an actually a visualization of his mind of where we were at. That blew me away.
So
that really did.
It is there for all of us, and I think that again, your Dad, I think you underestimate yourself and your abilities and what you've done and continue to still do. But just like these are amazing skills that people need to learn. especially right now with the way the world is today, and the fact that this whole post-traumatic growth, I think it's pretty cool that what, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, we spoke to the Georgia Nurses Association, and when we got finished, all the nurses to come around hugging Dad, and I just reached out to them, and they're like, hey, would you guys share your story again, because it's really relevant to what's going on right now, because a lot of our nurses on the front line, and we're very honored to be able to share that story again, the neuroscience of tragedy to triumph, and that's post-traumatic growth. And that's, again, we're going to be teaching a lot of the principles in the book. They're there. The workshops were actually there before the book, which was we kind of did it backwards, I think. And, well, some say we did.
Yeah.
I want to share something else that I'm experiencing here. We're still with the blindfold on, Howard. I'm hanging in there, but it's not easy. Now I'm dealing with complete anxiety. I know the thing is still recording. I have my finger on the mouse to make sure my computer doesn't go to sleep. I know it's recording, but I can't see it to confirm it. So there's that little bit of doubt, which is something you must live with all day, every day.
Well,
it's a great question, Howard.
There is a lot of doubt in my mind. For example, when I walk back to my track, and you can let your imagination wander, and you can create fear. And when you hear a noise, and I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. I went back to my track one day, picked up the handle, and kept tension to run around in a circle. And I sense something coming toward me, and this dog wasn't barking. It was just running toward me. And I remember before the dog got to me, rolling up into a ball, because I didn't know what this dog was going to do to me. And the neighbor came over.
And what did
Right.
what did it do when it got there?
You could make it anything you want to, Chad.
Exactly.
But
That's right.
my neighbor
You're
says,
blind.
"Oh, that dog ain't gonna bother you." And I said, "Really, Kirk?" I said, "It's not gonna bother me." He said, "Nah." So I picked up my handle and took off again. The dog came and tried to bite my feet.
Nice.
I said, "It's not gonna bother me, huh?"
Yeah. Nice.
Well, there's another great scene for the movie.
There's so many, Michael. We haven't even cracked the egg. There's so many that we can go into that this guy has shared.
Just in the book, I highly recommend the book. Anyway, by the way, I don't remember where I put it. I'm gonna now reach for it blindly. Oh, and show the book.
There we go. Right there. We all got a copy.
Yeah.
Three blinds visions.
Three blind.
I don't know where this belongs, but I'd like to share this thought.
Then it belongs right here, right now. Go.
Right here. Could be a better time.
Is people don't realize when they lose something as precious as their eyesight, how they have to start life all over again in a different world. Learning how to eat, learning how to dress yourself, simple things like learning how to walk, read, and dress yourself. It's basically something that you gotta just find courage to do. And I looked at my blindness when I lost my eyesight and went through this blind rehab school. I looked at it as an opportunity and a challenge to see if I could be the best at what I was doing, since I had to live this way anyway. And I went from being afraid of getting out of the bed at night to go to the bathroom, to learning my way around the Hines VA Hospital and the grounds. And not only that, through neighborhoods and downtown Chicago, going through swivel doors and escalators and following the crowd. And when you stop and think about crossing an 8-lane highway and all these noises and these things that are going on, and you got to separate that to find the courage that you need to make that happen. And they taught me a lot at Heinz and taught me how to adjust to the extent that I needed to. So,
Well,
And what you just described is resiliency.
yeah,
And
and
that's it in a nutshell. That is what resiliency is. That, I think a lot of times people believe that resilient people don't fear, or resilient people, don't have those type of feelings. Absolutely they do. But they also say, I'm going to be courageous. I'm going to do it anyways.
right.
Because I want to continue to grow, right?
well, that's what you
Yeah,
got to
well,
do.
I was
in
gonna
order
say,
to have-
If that's what you want, right? But as Michael would talk about, one of the reasons that I think all four of us want to do what we're doing is that we know that far too many people don't make that decision
right,
for a variety of reasons.
right.
And I have a little mantra that I came up with years ago from working with sexual abuse victims, and that is, that which was done to me is not of me.
Mm,
That which was done to me is not of me. So
right,
many times people identify themselves with what was done to them,
right.
as opposed to, yes, this was done to me, but this does not have to identify me or create me, or be who I'm going to be tomorrow. And that's what you did, Howard.
Right.
Yeah, you didn't deny the fact that your eyes got blown out. It's kind of hard to do that, but it would have been very easy for you to just to say, I'll let the government take care of me. I'll sit back and live on my disability. That would have defined you as a war victim. You weren't going to allow that to happen.
You embraced the victim and became the hero. And that's what we kind of do, is we took people through the hero's journey. Like, that victim mentality is really easy to adopt. And I think that you busted through the terror barrier every day. You were constantly you were getting comfortable, getting uncomfortable. And you just, every day, yes, I feel the fear, but I'm going to take that step, because what I want on the other side of fear is my freedom. And we talked about that in the book, is about how you wanted to feel alive. And that's what really all of us want, is that experience of feeling alive and enjoying life. And again, you just embraced all that. So
Chad, he gets so much of that from running.
Yes.
Just from going out and running and feeling the sun on his face and being able to move. And, we take it for granted, but Michael, you could probably empathize with this right now, with the present moment you're in, is when Howard wants to run somewhere, he has to depend on someone to guide him.
Right.
And I have been in that position where I've been guiding Howard, and I've completely forgotten that I'm guiding Howard, and I ran him right into a damn tree, or ran him into a bush. Because we're talking, and I've got his lead strap, and we're running along. And next thing you know, I'm like, I hear Howard go, "What the hell?" And I'm looking back, and I ran him into a big shrubbery because I wasn't paying attention. So just that element of trusting others and putting himself in the position to be vulnerable is so important. And
vulnerability. We need to talk about
vulnerability. It's absolutely the key. Without Howard being willing to be vulnerable, be willing to accept help from others, you never would have grown.
Right.
And it kept them out of shame. That when you begin to ask for help and reach out, because that silence keeps people in that shame, and that shame is really what holds people hostage. And so when you are honest and you reach out and say, "Hey, I might need some help right now," that's where that strength comes in. And so, Dad, would you talk a little bit about that vulnerability piece with being, in every, your professional life and your personal life?
Yeah, and actually, I think there's a great way to frame that, Howard, is by the story of, the first 10K you wanted to run to raise money for the Special Olympics, and you asked a local politician if he would be your guide, and you both
Speaker of the House, Bobby Grimm.
You both had to be vulnerable in those moments of training and then running, and you guys became great friends. So you could explain that story and talk about the vulnerability that you felt those first few times you ran together.
Having the opportunity to meet Bobby Grimm was such a privilege in my life, and we became good friends. Me being the first blind guy to run this 10-mile road race, and we became such good friends that he challenged me. He says, Myers, I'll put a blindfold on and run the race and see who can do the best at the 10 miles. And unfortunately, Bobby was in a lot better shape than myself. And he wore the blindfold the 10 miles, and he says, I'd never realized what it was like. And that reminds me too, I didn't finish my statement, never realized what it was like to be blind. It reminds me of the story of little Amy Norris, the second grader, when I gave a talk to her class about what it was like to be blind. And I felt somebody shrugging or pulling on my dress coat. And I looked down at her and she said, hi, Mr. Myers, my name is Amy. She says, I didn't know what it was like to be blind until I came here today. And I just want to thank you. I love you. And I remember that little girl making that impression on my life. It was many, many years ago. I say, wouldn't it be fantastic to run into her today?
Yeah.
Give her a hug, you know.
Right on.
Yeah, we should find her. Also, all of that you're talking about, and where Chris started a few minutes ago, and then Chad piled on, and then you, Howard, finished so eloquently, was the exact post-traumatic growth that you guys are talking about. And literally what this whole country and whole world needs to learn is all of the principles that you've applied in your post-traumatic growth. Because, again, most of us that don't have that challenge that we have to overcome, it's easy to fall into a way of being where you can just make excuses and be lazy or not be motivated enough and, not learn and grow. But really, our job as human beings, every single one of us, is to learn and grow every day, make ourselves better so we can make the world better. That's how the world gets better. Each one of us doing our best to be the best person we can and to overcome the challenges we've been given. If everybody did that, the world would be absolutely fine in a very short period of time.
Agreed.
That's easier said than
I agree with
which
that.
is why we're doing this work.
Yeah, we might actually evolve a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all it takes, man.
Howard, I got another question for you. So you've been 54, 55 years now without eyesight. If you could see one thing again, or you could spend one day with sight again, what would you see, or what would you do if you had a whole day?
The first thing that comes to my mind is I would love to have the privilege and freedom to see my children's faces and my wife.
Beautiful.
And almost selfishly and say this, it might come across kind of self-centered, but I say it quite frequently, just turning 74. Wouldn't it be a joke to look in the mirror and see Howard Myers at 74 years old now?
That would be pure trauma.
Yeah, it would.
There would be a lot of trauma.
It really would. I see a lot of things that I think a lot of sun shining, all the things that are free that none of us spend the time doing unless you pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
And having that privilege of being able to do that means a lot to me, because I can sit out on my deck by the pool and listen to a bird sing to me, and I'm self-centered enough to believe that bird's singing specifically to me.
Of course it is.
I don't think that makes you self-centered. I think it makes you aware and spiritual person. And if you talk to spiritual people, there are many who believe that a lot of times those birds are singing. I mean, I know personally for me,
Yep.
with my eyesight, I get signs from birds all the time, whether it's visual for me, because I still have that
Yeah.
ability, and also audible. Sometimes I'm going through a hard time or thinking about something, and I'll just hear this cardinal chirp in the distance or a hawk
Mm-hmm.
squeal. Those are the two birds that come to me the most, but I don't think
Yeah.
it's centered. I think you're paying attention.
Amen.
It's kind of a nice reminder of, hey man, we've been doing this for a long time. It's going to be okay. And that bird sends you that little song. It's all going to be all right. You know, Howard's birthday was what, Sunday? Saturday?
Saturday. Yeah.
Howard's birthday was Saturday. So I come over and I clean his pool and get his pool all clean. And then we spent about a half an hour just sitting on the pool deck. And just to describe in as much detail as I possibly can, what you asked me, the first question was, hey, Chris, how green is my lawn? And I said, Howard, I want you to think back to when you were coming into Vietnam, how green those jungles were. Remember that? That bright green, you remember of the jungle when you looked down and said, I can't believe there's a war going down there?
Exactly.
That's how green it is. I mean, June in Michigan is just brilliance of green. Everything is blossomed and everything is green. And then we talked about the blueness of the sky, and I said that the clouds were like cotton candy had been thrown up there, right? They were wispy, and you could see it, and I could see the smile on his face, and I could tell he could see it, completely see it. He was experiencing that. And, you know, that's like you just said, Michael, that's that awareness that we talk about embracing now and being in the present moment. So that's all it takes, is just to stop and enjoy what is.
Yeah, I mean,
And you have the ability to do that, Howard, because you're always right there.
Well, I visualize what this place looks like with
Yeah.
the sidewalks and the spa and the pool and the track and basketball court. And that was just something I visualized in my mind at one time. And now I'm living it.
Yep, exactly. That's blind vision.
That's blind vision.
Yes.
blind vision.
That's blind vision. There
You
it
know,
is.
I wanted to say too that, you know, one thing, another thing I'm realizing now as I'm going through this is that I don't know how long I've had this thing on. I don't know how long we've been going since then. So I'm going to have to take it off soon to make sure that we're not, you know, 3 hours into this thing. I know you guys will.
Yeah, you got about half hour.
But
time doesn't exist, Michael. We all know that. Time is an illusion.
Exactly. But my point, Chad, is that Howard, you have this incredible gift that you're forced to be present. You're not, you don't have the ability to be dragged into the illusion of time. Every moment, you just have to be present with what's going on right now. Doesn't matter if the freaking sun's up or not, right? You know, it's you're in the moment you're in, which is the same for all of us. We just don't realize it, and we have to overcome a lot of bullshit that we've built up in order to get present. And you're forced to be present, which to me seems like one of the, you can disagree, it's obviously up to you, but it seems like one of the gifts that you've been given from this whole experience.
Yeah, Dad, share what you've said before about what blindness has taught you.
Well, that's a pretty heavy question, Chad.
But about the gift, you said that if I didn't get my eyes blown out, you even said to me, like, you don't have to get your eyes blown out to wake up. And Michael and I talk about being awake, or if you call it consciousness, being present, which you said you don't have to get your eyes blown out, but it took you losing your eyesight to gain all the spiritual insight to life about being present and visualizing and you know, being connected to other people and looking for the good in all people and all things, and you know, just your overall attitude of gratitude. It kind of woke you up.
Well, it definitely gave me a different mindset, that's for sure. And the mindset that I choose to have on a daily basis creates the world that I want to live in and enjoy it as much as I possibly can with the circumstances I have to deal with. And I don't like being blind, but I love living life. And I think that's the key.
And you know what's interesting is that if there was a quantum physicist sitting in the room, he would say, Howard, you just nailed reality. You just,
Right.
my mindset that I choose creates my world I live in. You just nailed it. I mean, right there. That's just beautiful.
It is.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and also, you know, the acceptance of one of the things you said at the very beginning, Howard. It's not fair that you lost your eyesight. But we all know life is not fair. Unfortunately for me, I had a dad who loved to drill that lesson into our heads as a kid. I must have heard
Right.
it 1,000 times before I was 18. But it's a great lesson to have battered over your head because it's not, and it's not going to be. And once you let go of
No.
that, then it frees you up to just live with what you have and what you don't have.
Yeah.
And create what you'd like to create.
Right.
Yes, we are co-creators, and we're creating all the time, whether we know
Absolutely.
it or not. So
Yep.
might as well decide to be the hero of your own story, the director, but however you want to call it, the producer. What kind of story do you want to create? And Howard wanted to create. And that's one of the things we would ask. Howard, what's your next blind vision? Like when we're sitting up in front of an audience, even because he's one of the things we know is that we have to continue to create new stories and create new visions. Otherwise, sometimes we get comfortable and get stuck. So the evolutionary process is creating something new.
Right. Yeah.
And he's decided that he will allow George Clooney to be him in the movie.
George Clooney. I
Great.
love it.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think George would take the role. I mean, it looks a little bit like George.
Yeah.
George in 20. I see it.
All right, I'm gonna take this off now so I can see how much time we've been doing.
Welcome back to the visual world. Yeah.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
take a minute. Wow, that was so that was like 35 minutes or so.
Yeah, about 35, about half hour. You were blinded there. Yeah.
Wow, what an incredible learning experience, and doing it with you, Howard, is quite an honor to get a little understanding of what your world is like. And again, understanding too that you've been forced to realize that you have to create it in your mind if you want it to happen. The rest of us aren't forced to do that, but we should learn to do that because that's what we're all doing, as Chad just said. Unfortunately, most of us are doing it unconsciously. We're creating chaos, which is why the world is what it is. We're not paying attention, and we're manifesting chaos into the world.
Amen.
And at the end of the book, we're going to start wrapping up here, and I'll give you guys a chance to say whatever you want to say. There's the 3 C's: commitment, control, and challenge. Those were the things that allowed you to have blind vision and to live the extraordinary life that you live. The commitment to do what it takes. The control part, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is controlling at a high level the things that you can control, and then letting go of the things you can't. It's a common concept we've all heard from AA and other organizations. And then having a challenge, giving yourself the challenge to overcome so that you can continue to stay positive and feel good about yourself. For you, Howard, that was a constant thing you did. And in the book, they talk about that being a key to the whole thing, is that you were constantly challenging yourself with things that you didn't think you could do, and certainly things that others didn't think you could do. But over and over again, you did it. I mean, another great scene in the movie is you going to Vegas with your buddy. I mean, what an
blind guy.
That was a grin. That really was a grin.
Honestly,
that's one word for it.
There's a lot of visuals in Vegas, but I would imagine if you can't take part in that, which you can't, there's so much other ear candy and smell candy and touch candy that you could take part in Vegas.
There was probably some touch candy.
Yeah. When that came out, I was like, I probably shouldn't have said that, but I'm not referencing any specific story that I know of. So I'm not trying to throw Howard under the bus to his wife here. But, there's all kinds of other sensory overload you can experience in Vegas. And that must have been a wild ride. I don't know if you want to talk about that briefly before we close up.
you know, it was just kind of following the crowd and being young at that time. And I always looked at everything as a challenge, that I can do this and I can do that. And I always, I never thought too much about, well, I can do this because I'm blind. I just did it because it just something that I wanted to do. And I figured it out when I was going there, and how, you know, I never figured out really if I was going to do it or not. It was just a matter of going ahead and figuring it out. You know, you ask people and you give people an opportunity to feel good about themselves by helping you. That's basically how we got through Vegas, Joe and I. And he had the same personality, and his personality rubbed off on me. He's deceased now and gone, but the man taught me a great deal about life.
He was a blind mentor. So that's the chapter, the blind leading the blind. And he was he encouraged you to do and try a lot of things. And so there is that mentor, that surrogate father figure that came in from, I think, World War II. Right. A World War II vet. And you two teamed up and had some fun, and he taught you a lot of life lessons.
Yeah. Joe was a Mr. Personality. He loved the opposite sex. He didn't mind showing it. And he never met a stranger.
No.
What a great way to live.
Good formula. Exactly. That's a good formula.
So we're going to wrap up now, and I want to just go around to, we'll start with Chad, and then Chris, and then Howard. And just, you know, say any last words that you want to say, and think, you know, for you, Chad, and Chris, I would sort of suggest maybe what your relationship with Howard has meant to you and what you've learned by being a friend to him. And for you, Howard, like, if there's one thing that you want to leave people with from this whole conversation, what would that be? And we'll let Chad and Chris go first, so you can think about that for a minute and tune them out while they're babbling.
Right on. Oh, he's good at that.
So I guess one of the things that Dad has taught me is to kind of see the world through spiritual eyes. Like, as a kid growing up, I just, through observation, just watching and learning, and I really didn't realize what I was learning. And so I guess many times I've forgotten, but he always, it comes back to me, my awareness of not to be a victim and to not make excuses, that what you want is important, and to visualize it and to go after it. So I think he's just a great example. The project that we did together and we continue to do together has been, I can't think of a greater honor of like working with my father and working with good friends to share and to help people. It's been an incredible journey, and I would like to continue it for sure, because every time we've actually shared the story, it's had whether it's an impacting one person or 1,000 or even 1 million, that's what really matters. And so, I just wanted to thank you, Dad, for all the things that you taught me, just by being a role model. And of course, we talk about the fact in the book, you taught me the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's no such thing as a perfect parent. We were very honest and raw in the book about your shortcomings as a father and as a husband sometimes, and how you, as Michael always says, how to be a better human being. You recognize that. Like, how can I be a better father? How can I be a better blind guy? How can I be a better husband? And you've always had the desire to grow and to change and to want a better life. So I know that's why Michael and I were pretty much in alignment when we met. So thank you.
Hang on, Chris. I'll give it to you in a second. thank you, Chad, and acknowledge you for your part in this and your part in the world, and taking what you've learned from your father and taking a leadership role to try and spread these messages to help people. I think what you said about victimization is really important. We've touched on it a few times. I just want to hammer it one more time. We can all choose whether to be a victim or not. Visualizing the things that you want in your life, so that you're consciously visualizing the things that you want instead of unconsciously visualizing the things that you don't want, and then calling those things into your life and wondering why you're miserable. We all do that.
Exactly.
We all do that. So, Chad, thank you. I look forward to not only working on helping you guys make this into a movie, but we can't share the details of the bigger project we're working on yet. We're still figuring it out. We've got something pretty big boiling that we think is going to make a big difference, and everybody on this call is going to be a part of that. But it starts from conversations with you. So thank you. Chris, the floor is yours, sir.
Okay. Well, for me, it's kind of a twofold gig. Professionally, you know, one of my roles, obviously, I'm a private practice therapist, but I'm also the clinical director of an agency, and we provide treatment, residential treatment for neglect and abused children. And so Howard, coming into my life 8-9 years ago, really expanded a lot of my clinical eyesight when it came to working with these children who had every right in the world to be victims. They have been victimized by the people that they should be able to trust more than anybody, and that would be their parents, to the point where they've been removed and now they come to us for some healing. And so many times I find myself referencing what I know of Howard's journey will come out in a conversation with one of my youth. I tell this to Howard all the time, that he has no idea the impact he's made on so many children who've never met him, but have gotten it through me, because I'm able to share what I know. You know, just the idea, the simple idea of, I go to bed in the darkness, I wake up in the darkness, I choose to live in the light. These children in my center are living in darkness as well.
Yeah.
For so many of them, they don't know where their next home is going to be. They don't know if it's going to be today or if it's going to be 6 months or a year from now. So to a certain extent, they're living in darkness, but yet they wake up in the morning, put a smile on their face, embrace the new day. They're choosing to live in the light. And I try to reinforce that with them as much as I possibly can. So from a professional standpoint, he's had a huge impact on me. Personally, he's my surrogate father. My father unexpectedly passed away 15 years ago. They're the exact same age. So there's a, you know, not to get too psychological, but I'm sure there's some transference or projection going on between Howard and I's relationship from my perspective, but it's all good. And I think, you know, that means a lot to me. There's a lot that goes on as far as just being able to come out and talk with him and spend time with him. Not colleague to colleague, not father to son. She has his son, obviously, but there's definitely a father and son type of a feel there at times. So from a personal standpoint, you know, that has been a beautiful gift for me as well. So, you know, I love the man, not only as a colleague, but as a human being. And I have tremendous respect and honor for the message that he continues wants to teach and share with the world. And I'm all about, I call us compassion warriors. And he certainly went from being a warrior in the jungles of Vietnam to now he's a full-fledged compassion warrior who wants to help anybody he can heal and have a better life. So I'm all about that.
I love that. That means a lot to me. I look at myself the same way, as a spiritual warrior.
Right.
And
I know you do.
The first time we've met, Chris, I just want to say how much of a pleasure and an honor it's been. You are an incredible, impressive man, and I appreciate what you just said. And I'd like to invite everybody listening to realize that we all have a choice every moment of every day, whether we're going to live in the light or the darkness.
Right.
This is
a wonderful pleasure as well, Michael. Thank you for inviting me.
It's an emotional one for me because I see people choosing the darkness far too often.
Oh, absolutely.
It hurts me to see that. I cry in this podcast, so this isn't a big deal.
That's good.
Thank you for that, and thank you for your part in spreading that message. That's so important. And I look forward to working with you on all kinds of stuff moving forward as we grow.
All right, man. Me too.
Thank you. Howard, you get the last word. You can say whatever you want. You can tell someone off that you've been waiting to tell off for 30 years. whatever you want to do.
What I want to say is very simple. It's a philosophy that I live by, and I'd like the audience to hear what I'm going to say, and most importantly, live what I'm going to suggest to you. You know, I believe this, that you can be, do, and have anything you want in life with the right attitude and the right belief system. And that applies to all of us. That's all I got to say about that.
Mm-hmm.
Amen, brother.
That's right.
An incredible honor to have you on the podcast and to be able to call you a friend and a colleague now. I can't believe how blessed and fortunate I am. So thank you all for taking part in this. I'm going to stop recording now, but don't hang up, because then we'll say a proper goodbye. Thank you so much. Any last words? Anyone else?
Oh, thank you, Michael.
Living the light.
Yes, we had a lot of fun with you, bro. Thank you very much. Been honored to do this with you. Thank you for inviting us on.
My sincere
Absolutely.
pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Feel like you're sitting right across from me.
Well, I am, kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
Now without the blindfold, and I got to tell you, Howard doesn't get that opportunity. He lives with that blindfold on all day, every day, and he still, as you heard, lives an extraordinary life. So next time you're feeling down, feeling bad about the way things are in the world, feeling bad about yourself, feeling like you can't do something, think about Howard. I want you to think about Howard. I meant what I said to him. He's an American treasure, not because he served his country well in war and earned a Purple Heart. He is an American treasure for that, but even bigger treasure because of how he's lived his life afterwards and setting an example for all of us to live extraordinary lives and get over our bullshit excuses that hold us back from doing that. I hope that you got as much out of it as I did. Stay tuned. We're going to be doing a lot more stuff together, that group and I. Not just the movie, but there's some bigger plays involved, which we'll share when we have some more detail about it. But thanks for listening. Zilosophy on Golf is the book. The Zilosophy podcast you're listening to now. Go to the Zilosophy YouTube channel. There's always good videos being put up. If you want to support me, you can email. You can do it to my email, which is z@zilosophy.org. And or you can Venmo me at Michael-Zildjian at Venmo. So thanks for listening. That was Blind Vision on the Zilosophy podcast. I'm Z, and you're welcome.